And welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darin Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And today we've got a special guest, Mr. Brian Skutle of Sonic Cinema will be joining us in a discussion of 1986's Rad. Man, I can't say even the name of that movie without laughing a little bit or chuckling. That just to give you a little preview of what we'll be talking about. And there's a lot of affection. People have a lot of affection for that movie, and it's hard to say that I blame them. But it's also hard to not laugh at him when, anyway. But yeah, we'll talk about that. But first, let's recap our last episode. What movie did we talk about last time?
Well, we talked about Hoosiers, 1986, starring Gene Hackman. It was a David Anspaugh movie. Yep. We both decided it was worth remembering. We liked the characters. We liked the story behind it. I had a little bit of issue with the fact that I wanted more stylized filmmaking, or more creative filmmaking. But I mean, there was elements of that in there, so it is well done. Still, I will still say I can appreciate it for what it is. But yeah, we both thought that it was worth remembering. So
yeah, it's a good, solid entertainment. There wasn't any, like you said, you had problems with that. I had problems with why are Gene Hackman and Dennis Hopper in this movie where they're playing two-dimensional characters, where they're usually three-dimensional actors that really like are heavy hitters as far as Hollywood actors are concerned. But yeah, they did their job like everybody else. They did their job. It's a very convincing movie, even with problems. It's a sports movie. They're all going to attack, come at you from different ways. And I think we just came down that it was very effective and it did its job very, very well. So it's hard to talk about that.
Yeah, and it makes you feel something, and it's inspirational. So it has that going for it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so again, that was Hoosiers. We had a great conversation on that. Again, a lot of affection for that one too. We want to go ahead and see, I can't do it. We want to talk about Rad, but first, let's go ahead and have a gander at the trailer.
His name is Crew.
Hey, good looking.
BMX is his world. Rad is his way of life.
The world would be a lot better off without him.
We're here for the biggest and most important bicycle motocross event ever held, Hell Track. This is a very important race. The very finest riders in the country are here riding for some $100,000.
Hell Track in this big town. They've got to be kidding. This is a joke.
I really think I can get this one. I think I've got a chance.
I don't want to hear any more about it.
Everyone's on his case.
Get that. The paperboy thinks he's a pro.
He's nothing next to Bert Taylor.
He's got the style.
There's something about the way you ride so natural.
And he's going to prove it.
I've never seen such raw determination and talent in one kid.
Against the factory hotshots.
Looks like the local yokel's gonna race after all.
It's gonna take a miracle to beat this guy.
Against the big money fixers.
All you have to do is take out that kid.
Against impossible odds.
You scared now?
This guy doesn't even stand a chance.
Yeah.
He's going for it all. Rad.
Okay, so Rad, 1986, directed by Hal Needham, starring a plethora of actors, I guess you could call them. Lori Loughlin's in there. Ray Walston's in there. But obviously we want to welcome our guest, Brian Skutle of Sonic Cinema. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh man, it's a pleasure. I don't know if you listened to our Hoosiers episode, but at the end I mentioned that I've wanted to get some of my Twitter friends on before, but I was just afraid, saying, "Hey, who wants to be on the podcast?" And then nobody says anything. I've been afraid to do that. I know that you and I have been talking and chatting for a bit. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Brian, Johnny, he's I know you're not on Twitter, but he's one of the few people that actually pays attention to me.
Oh, good. Other than your wife?
Well, even that, I don't know. Mainly on social media. But yeah, I mean, Brian, you're the host of the Sonic Cinema podcast. You got your own a blog. I mean, you've been at this for a while, at least 2009. And I know, listen to your podcast, how you started out. If you want to tell some of our listeners, how did you get started? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, it's a bit long. It's a bit earlier in 2009. So Sonic Cinema actually went online in 2004. And but I've been writing reviews for a few years longer than that. And basically the whole point of Sonic Cinema was to is sort of to be a hub for not only my movie reviews, but fan commentaries that some friends of mine and I had done over the years, as well as music I composed over the years. And when I went to college, one of the main thing I wanted to do was film music. I wanted to compose music for films. And but things took me into different paths. And honestly, like the more I've done it, film criticism, discussing films, whether it's in writing, on commentaries, or on the podcast, which has been going on since 2015. That's more. It's more what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, and I still compose every once in a while if inspiration strikes. But first and foremost, I'm a film critic, and it's a passion of mine.
Okay. Yeah, I was explaining to my wife that you're more of a film historian. I mean, I know you go into a lot of depth on, Kurosawa you've done, Jess Franco you've done, you've dived into Jackie Chan, stuff like that. And so it's great listening to you talk, because you're very personable, but you're knowledgeable as well.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I try to be. And the personable part is the most important part. I mean, that's, one of my favorite film critics, I think one of everybody's favorite film critics is the late great Roger Ebert, and I love the personal aspect of what he brought to some of his best reviews when it comes to movies, and those are the movies that I tend to gravitate towards most. Not necessarily, but it's interesting because of the fact that we're talking about Rad today, and there's a little bit of that with me in this, but at the same time, it's like the critic also comes out. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Absolutely. Well, like I was saying, one of the things that, I mean, it's hard, like being a movie critic, and I know that personal stuff, you lead almost every one of your reviews with kind of a personal anecdote of where you're coming from. And I think that's important. I know Ebert did that. I know Drew McLeany did that a lot. But that's something that really gives you an in. And I know, like, I connected with you, especially in your reviews. I know you did the recent, the curating the cinematic diet, and, Martin Scorsese, how he's, his comments on cinema's content or cinema as roller coasters. But and the way that you talked about, certain films would get you interested in other like filmmakers and start like broadening your horizons a bit. What, like, as far as filmmakers go, who are you most excited that you've discovered in your film journey?
I think Tarkovsky is probably the most exciting one, and partially because of the fact that he was one of the first ones that really got me interested in world cinema. And when I first started watching, well, I'd like to say Truffaut, but the fact is, it's like I was kind of slow getting into Francois Truffaut. But since I got into his work a little bit more deeply, he's definitely one of my favorite filmmakers. The example I use in that blog that you mentioned is Alex Proyas, who directed The Crow, directed Dark City, and basically his work essentially led me to Tarkovsky in a very roundabout way. Somebody mentioned Stalker in a review that they had written about The Crow, and I got interested because The Crow is a movie that I absolutely adore, and it was just one of those weird things that let's see, trying to think of other filmmakers. I mean, though I think those are the two biggest ones as far as my personal feelings for him. John Woo's another one, which we talked a little bit about on Twitter earlier today. Broken Arrow sort of got me into his Hong Kong films, and then basically I've just been a fan of his ever since. And Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, it's always like a gift, the idea of movies leading you to other movies, leading you to other filmmakers, and so on and so forth. And that's one of the things I mean, you know, I could think of, I'm sure, give me enough time, I could probably think of plenty more than those. But yeah, I think those are the major ones for me.
Yeah, and Tarkovsky especially is kind of a deep dive. I know, like, that's something we have in common, and Johnny too, is maybe getting bored with blockbusters. It kind of like broadens your horizon too, that you want to find out, like, you know, a little bit deeper as far as entertainment goes. And so that's interesting because, you know, that's a good way to learn. Like, oh, that's nice that some, like, a filmmaker said that a certain way, or it gives me that specific feeling. What else can I get out of him, or what else can I get out of people that he kind of communicates with or sides with?
Yeah. Yeah, and Tarkovsky, especially with Tarkovsky, it's like that's not an easy commitment. Like, I've had friends of mine who are as big of fans of like David Lynch and Jodorowsky and filmmakers like that. They bounce off of Tarkovsky. Like, it just some movies of his they love, some movies they just can't get into. But the thing is, I completely understand that because of the fact that, especially the later films of his career, he was very much making movies for himself. He was not necessarily interested in straightforward narratives, and he wasn't really interested in making films that weren't deeply personal. But ironically, that's one of the things that connects me the most to the films of his that I'm connected to the most.
Yeah, it's a lot like you kind of want to have that cinematic diet, kind of a flavor of everything, because you don't want to eat at McDonald's your whole life. You're kind of missing out on a lot of things, and so that's one of the things, obviously, that, you know, it's good to be able to open yourself up to something like Rad.
Yeah.
Who's probably the complete opposite of Tarkovsky.
Yeah. I mean, well, certainly. I mean, Hal Needham is, you know, best known for Smokey and the Bandit, Cannonball Run. And yeah, I mean, Rad's one of those movies where it's like there's nothing. I mean, we'll talk about it, but there really is nothing like deep or insightful about it in any way. Like, it's very perfunctory, very formulaic. But again, we'll talk about it as we go along.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it's not enjoyable, because I had an absolute blast watching this. Well, if we want to, let's go ahead and just start talking about it. You know, with our podcast, we try to. I know you said that you didn't really have a huge, deep connection to it, but we try to find that connection and decide. Because again, one of the things, especially your Face Off podcast that you did with Jacob Belinsky, first of all, awesome podcast, awesome episode, because the whole time I was like, damn it, I wish I could have been a part of that. Like, and you hit on like all the beats that I was like, which I was amazed by. I was like, oh, I hope you talk about this. And then as soon as I thought that, you talk about it. And you and Jacob, you both shared in your love for it, which Johnny and I really love Face Off a lot. But it's tough because you never know where somebody's going to come at it from a certain point of view, or from their, you know, how they're going to view the movie. But so it's a joy being able to meet people and talk with people that kind of share your same views. But one of the things I was impressed with in that episode is at the end, I think Jacob brought up the point of NostalgiaCast, which is just to take movies that you grew up with and do they change, or do you change with them? And I just thought that was a great way in. Which is another great way in is the last episode that Johnny and I did was Hoosiers, which is an underdog sports drama, and that's what Rad tries to be, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But what was your first experience with Rad? What are your earliest memories of it?
I can't remember, if I saw it theatrically, but I mean, I definitely watched on HBO growing up and taped it, and really, I mean, it's one of those movies that I just played over and over. One of the things we'll talk about, and is the underdog sports movie is as a movie watcher, it's kind of my kryptonite. It's kind of the one genre that, you know, regardless of, within reason, of course, regardless of where you're taking the story, chances are I'll at least enjoy it, even if I don't necessarily think it's a particularly good film. So, I mean, this was a movie that I watched quite often, and I sort of got interested in freestyle biking and stuff like that, and got like a freestyle bike, and tried to do like various tricks and stuff like that. And then this is a movie, it just never came out on DVD. And so it was, once I really stopped watching on VHS, it's like I sort of got away with it from it until Vinegar Syndrome put out their Blu-ray last year. And I knew as soon as it came out, as soon as I heard about it, it's like, I haven't seen this movie in almost 30 years. I really need to get this. So, yeah. I mean, that was basically, I think that was basically my history with the film growing up. That was basically just watching on HBO and just watching it constantly.
All right, and that seems like it'd be a very common story. Jonny, what about you? What was your experience with the movie?
Well, first of all, Brian, thanks for being on the show, man. We really appreciate it. Like Darin said, I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do the social media thing. I did for a while, but about 3 years ago, I just kind of left because I got sick of it. So I'm off that scene. So Darin had to send me links to your podcasts and your reviews, which I did watch and read. So I want to say great job. I think they're great.
Thank you.
So, like I say, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Also, I was telling Darin earlier, it takes pressure off of me having a third person here. So I'm glad you're here to give more comments, more feedback.
Well, that's probably why I didn't even bother asking you any questions during that whole first 25 minutes that Brian and I were just chatting.
Hey, and I was enjoying it too, just sitting here and kicking back.
All right. Anyway, well, I apologize for that, Jonny.
No. So my history with this movie, I saw it at a birthday party, I remember. And it was just a bunch of older kids in the neighborhood that had a birthday party. And I got invited somehow. They were like maybe 2 years older than I was. And I went to the party and they watched Rad. And the birthday boy's mom kept coming to the room. And she kept coming in at times when they were swearing or flipping the bird. And so she'd be like, you be watching this movie? And that's all I really remember about that movie is like the mom saying, you shouldn't be watching this. But I do remember that it kind of sparked an interest in, riding BMX bikes. And I had a BMX bike. And I think I had one that looked like Cruise. It was like the red and blue. It had like the blue seat and it had like the little red paddings and that kind of thing. So I never got good at any of the tricks, but I did, do a lot of bike riding. So it was fun to watch this movie again and kind of relive that experience of riding around town and giving my friends a pump or whatever and having them jump on the handlebars and all that kind of stuff. So that was fun to revisit this.
Okay, that's good. And so I guess that leaves, my memories of the movie is about a month ago when Brian agreed to be on the podcast, he said, "Oh, I'd like to do Rad." And I thought, "Oh, I've heard of that movie." So that's my experience with it. It's a bit of a running gag because Brian, we did an episode of Better Off Dead. And for the longest time, I think I said this during the episode, for the longest time, I kept telling people, "Oh yeah, Better Off Dead. I've seen it. It's great." And then when I finally sat down to watch it, I thought, I have never seen this. And I think it was because just so many clips have surfaced online and you'd heard so many people talk about, mention dialogue from it. And so it felt like I'd seen it. And yeah. I didn't want to embarrass myself and say, "Oh, I've seen Rad," because I knew for a fact that I probably hadn't. So my experience with it was last night. I watched it for the first time and it was great. I had a blast. But the thing that I wanted to mention about it is that if you look at doing the history and studying the history of it, there's an affection for this movie that has nothing to do with critics. For the longest time, it had the biggest discrepancy between critics and fans.
I think so. I mean, Leonard Maltin gave it a bomb in his movie guide, and it's like that's a bit unfair, but it's also kind of not. It's not entirely unjustified either. No, I think the thing that really when I finally watched the movie when I got the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray was, first of all, it blew my mind just how well they did the transfer from this movie. It's like, I don't remember ever watching this movie and it looking this good. It's really fantastic on that respect. But yeah, the screenplay by Sam Bernard and Jeffrey Edwards, basically it's basically Rocky with BMX racing, but not like the original Rocky, kind of like the Rocky sequels,
minus
like
the story.
as they continued.
Yeah, I think I see the comparison. Well, you know, Malton giving it a bomb, like you said, it's I can see that, but then you can also see, I don't know if I would call this one of those like midnight movies, like that's so bad that you just enjoy laughing about it with your, maybe it's one of those, maybe, you know, we'll talk about that. But it was interesting too, like, because the movie comes on and I'm watching the credits and like, oh, I'm never going to hear of any of these people. Like, this is going to be funny. And then you see like Hal Needham's name come up, which for anybody who doesn't know, he was a stuntman, right?
Yeah, for Burt Reynolds, right?
Yeah, and he wrote the script for not Cannonball Run. That was later, for Smokey and the Bandit, and I believe the story goes that Burt Reynolds like kind of spearheaded that and let that be his directorial debut. And they made what, Stroker Ace, they made Hooper, they made Cannonball Run, you know, all those things. And I didn't know this, but apparently Tarantino, obviously Tarantino's going to be a fan of Hal Needham, but he based Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood off of the relationship between Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds. So, I mean, that's a big like flex, you know, that you'd never heard of before. I just think, Brian, had you heard that before?
No, I hadn't. I mean, honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. It's like I'm still, with the exception of this movie, I'm still relative novice when it comes to Hal Needham's films. It's like I've never really watched like Smokey and the Bandit or Cannonball Run and stuff like that. So I definitely will at some point, but it's like I just not been, I guess. I just haven't really felt like getting to them at some point. I mean, I will in the future, but because I am curious to see Hal Needham doing something else and seeing how he directed other movies that were, you know, considerably more successful.
Yeah, I know, Johnny, you and I have talked about Smokey and the Bandit before, and maybe you'll agree with this, maybe you won't, but Smokey, it's weird watching. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about it. I don't know if it's Hal Needham not connecting with the material as much. I know that he saw BMX bikers. It's a simple story as that. He saw them one day on the side of the street or something like that. Was like, that could be a good movie. You know, we could really cash in on that. But I think Smokey and the Bandit, there's a crispness to it, and there's a like a full on like energy, a propulsive energy to it. And I don't necessarily think that was applied here. It seemed like it was from two different directors. Johnny, being a Smokey and the Bandit fan, how do you think he fared directorial wise?
Well, I would agree with you that I think Smoking the Bandit is a better movie than Rad, and I think it's just maybe because the characters are more well developed in Smoking the Bandit, and it does have that energy. I agree with you with that. It has that energy that I think Rad lacks. I mean, I think maybe the race scenes are in Rad, or the very final race scene has that energy, but the rest of it just, I think for me, it falls short in a lot of areas.
All right, Brian, what did you think of the direction in Rad?
No, I mean, I definitely agree. Where it's like the interplay between the characters is just like, it's very perfunctory. It's basically actors reading lines in a script. I don't know that I've ever seen Talia Shire this bored in a movie. And I mean, it's important it is important to mention that I have a feeling the main reason Talia Shire was in this movie is because her husband at the time, Jack Schwartzman, is one of the producers of it. And it's funny, in the Sparks Brothers, the Edgar Wright documentary about the band Sparks, which is coming out later this year, he has Jason Schwartzman talk about the fact that Sparks song. What's the name of it? Sorry, let me look it up here.
So are they related, Jason Schwartzman and Jack Schwartzman? Are they related?
Yes. Yeah. Talia Shire is Jason Schwartzman's mother. Schwartzman's mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so the Sparks song is music that you can dance to, which is, played in the movie, and he actually introduces the fact that his mother was in this BMX movie called Rad in the documentary that song plays in. And it's funny because of the fact that I was rewatching it in preparation for this podcast, and I wonder if Hal Needham realizes that song is kind of a joke on like dance music at the time, as opposed to a straight dance song. Because I mean, and I know they talk about in the documentary how it was, it was intended to be something that was like genuinely catchy, but it's also they're winking. If you understand Sparks, which that documentary is fantastic, if you get a chance to see it later in the year, I highly recommend it. But they're also winking at that type of music as well as trying to do something genuine. And that dance scene where where Team Mongoose goes out on the dance floor, it's something else. It's funny because I completely forgotten about that scene, and I don't know how.
Especially the note that I wrote down, which is funny. I know, it looks like the twins got their costumes from Battlestar Galactica. And then if you look it up, I think it actually says that they actually borrowed it from the set of V, that miniseries. And so I thought, oh my gosh, that makes total sense. That's great. And going back to like I said, I don't know if I definitely want to come back to that dance scene. Holy cow. I want to come back to that.
There's a lot to talk about with that.
But with Brian, do you think Hal Needham was connected to this material? Do you think, again, Smokey and the Bandit's not a movie that's like necessary. It's a fun popcorn movie, but it's not necessary for your growth as a cinema person. But do you think he was as connected to the material this time as he would have been like in his earlier years? How do you think he fared that way?
I think, it's you don't really feel like there's much of a connection to the material. You do think it's you do sort of feel like, because you feel like he's basically going by the conventions of what the genre requires, and does it work in that respect? I mean, I'm not sure that necessarily does. I mean, the racing, it's funny for me, like I think if we're talking about the racing, I actually think Helltrack, the final scene, the Helltrack race, is not nearly as interesting in terms of the way it's shot and put together as the qualifying races. I think the qualifying races are actually very well put together. I mean, I feel like he did understand what is required to make that sequence work. Where the Helltrack sequence, it's like, by the end, if Crew doesn't win the race, you seriously are like, you can never have like the original Rocky ending where it's like Crew doesn't win the race. He has to win the race at the end of the movie. And it's like, there are some parts of it that are good, but at the same time, that race is just so complicated. There's so many different aspects to it that it's hard to, I feel like to a certain extent it's hard to keep momentum up.
Yeah, like when you watch like an action movie, and it's hard to do, you kind of want to build an intensity. Like when I think of action, like the way that The Incredibles is stylized and the way that it's molded is each action scene in that one that Brad Bird directs, the next one is twice as intense as the one that came before it. So I always say this, it gets to the part where the Parr families finally fighting together on the island, but then the fight stopped. The bad guy comes and stops them before they can actually get a good vibe going. And then the final battle is the biggest. And so as far as the structure of an action movie goes, I think Incredibles is great the way it does that. And a lot of action movies don't really do that. I thought with Rad, it's interesting because I think the bike racing scenes get less interesting as they go.
Yeah.
I like the first one where it shows Crew like Matt, he's delivering his paper route, which I thought was funny because it was like, oh, USA Today presents Rad. I thought, why is that so prominent on the front? But the way that he's maneuvering, and he's on the garbage can and he's going through, that was creative, I thought, even though it was like silly. And then, like you said, the qualifying race was, it makes sense. And then they build up Hell Track to be such this big thing, and they never show it. So when they finally show it, I watched it with my wife last night, and I was like, they built this up, and it's just like dirt mounds.
Yeah.
And I guess the way that he shot it was there wasn't enough, so they had to shoot the same, because you notice they go down the same hills 3 or 4 times because it's around it. Yeah. And he just shot all that shot. He did all of that with in 4 times, so he could get that shot before they moved on. And I don't know, Johnny, what did you think? Did you agree with that? I mean, do they build an intensity or do they lessen it, or what did you?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Brian, that the qualifying race is more exciting than the Hell Track race. But I made this note while watching the movie. Crew cheats during the qualifying race. He qualified because he cheated.
Doesn't he cut through trees? He cuts in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess they're going on the fact that he's, from the hometown. He knows the shortcuts. He can do that kind of thing. But he still cheated. Why no one call him out? He shouldn't have qualified. And then in the Hell Track race, when Bart slows down to do the one-on-one thing, whatever, it was like if Bart had not slowed down, or if Crew had not got away with cheating, Crew wouldn't have won. You know what I mean? The whole movie's pointless because he cheated, and then Bart slows down and lets him win, basically.
Yeah.
I noticed that too. I was like, should that be legal?
And I feel like that was the way for them to sort of try to build tension during the Hell Track sequence, because of the fact that otherwise it's like you have to have that mono moment, because the part of the problem with this, and part of the reason it doesn't work successfully within the underdog sports genre, I think, is that it's manufactured tension at the end, because of the fact that it's you have this, Cruz basically kind of, sort of like what Johnny says is he does cheat, which is hilarious because of the fact that I think if you're going to sort of compare this movie in terms of what it's trying to do in that genre, I think the Karate Kid is probably the more appropriate version, other than Rocky. And even so far as the main rider, Bart Taylor, the actor who plays him essentially looks like William Zabka from Karate Kid. And and so I don't think it's that successful because of the fact that so much of the tension in that final race is manufactured. I don't even necessarily, I mean, you're not wrong, Johnny. He does cheat, which is hilarious. And I will say the paper route, I love the paper route too. I think it's the most engaging. I think it's the most entertaining racing we see, because of the fact that I don't know if a paper route ever was that complicated in the history of mankind, but it's just the Rube Goldberg aspect of the way that works is really fun to watch right off the bat. So
okay. And that's great. Well, we talked about underdog sports dramas. We talked about Hal Needham not really feeling the material, I guess, as much as he should. I just felt like, and I think one of us mentioned it, the word perfunctory. I think or also because that's what it seems like. It seems like, oh, here's the part where his mom kind of disagrees with him, or here's the part where a Duke has to come along and he has to like raise a ruckus or cause some problems or something like that. And so like you said in your review of the movie, Brian, it's like as soon as they present a problem for Crew, it automatically gives him a solution. And that's a note that I wrote, is like, why are they building problems and then they're like resolving the issue in the very next scene? And like, where's the through line? It's funny that like, because again, I thought it was funny when they started out and they have the town meeting where Duke is there and everybody's there, and Ray Walston's character, what is his name, Burton Timmer, he's there, and they're like, oh, we're welcoming like the bikes. And so I was like, oh, they're not even against it. Like I know when we talked about with Hoosiers, Gene Hackman comes in and he starts raising a ruckus and people have issues with it. They're like, what's going, like, why is he doing this? And that's part of the sports drama formula. But this time, like, it starts off with them going, oh, here come the bikes and it's going to be great. And I wrote down, oh, yay to commerce. Yay to the power of commerce. And they have no issues with it. And then I thought it was funny that the towns lady sits up and she goes, yes, but what about the people that want to compete, but they can't compete in their own backyards? And then it gets really serious and everybody pauses. And I was like, whoa, that really hit them hard. And then, oh, so that's the drama. But then, the stuff with the mom, I didn't really feel it, but the stuff with the mom comes up and it's so funny because I know what they're trying to do, but she has the dialogue where she's like, but isn't that the day where you need to take your SATs? And she goes, you're being reckless. And then they resolve. And again, I thought it was funny that when they do the qualifications, I'm like, why is the mom all of a sudden interested in the qualifications?
Exactly.
Why is she? And it's just so she can see Crew on the TV.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, what does she say? She goes, damn it, Crew, or something like that. And she walks off. And then she comes back and she's like, I can't believe you're doing it. And that's when she says you're being reckless. And he goes, Mom, I can take the SATs again in 6 months. And she goes, you have to promise me that you will. And he goes, I will. And then that's it. It's all resolved.
Her lack of give a damn with regards to this story it's priceless. I mean, at the end of the movie, like she goes to Hell Track, she watches them race and stuff like that, but she's not nearly as into it as the woman who Crew helped earlier on in the movie at the parade. And it's like, he's such a nice boy. It's like, you're talking to his mother. It's like, and his mother just couldn't care less about what's going on. And the thing is, it's like, there's still this aspect where it's like his younger sister forged his mom's signature. It's like, we're not going to bring that up again as a part of this. And it, like you said, it just puts one thing on top of another. Oh, and it's resolved. It's resolved. Yeah, I mean, this is a completely ridiculous movie to watch, and I mean, you basically know what's going to happen from almost the second it starts, pretty much.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, we talked about formulas, and that's one of the things that are like catnip, because it's like a checklist, and you're expecting these things to come up and to kind of feel something. But I just thought, the way that they're treating the BMX biking so seriously, I'm like, I'm not buying this world. Like, it would have been different if they went like whole hog and like everybody all of a sudden is like everybody's biking everywhere instead of just these, like, is this town so? And again, it's the Duke part where he's like, they're watching the parade and he goes, this is some parade. And I was like, has he never been to a parade before? Because there's just cars going by and it's really slow. And I'm like, what's the baseline?
It's a small town parade. It's like, that's all it is. And, it's funny because of the fact that you brought up that opening meeting where they're talking about, Hell Track coming to his community. And it's like, I couldn't help but think one time watching the movie that if you wanted to make a really good version of this movie somehow existed, I think the way you could do it is because you've heard about all of these times where it's like, I don't know how much you paid attention to, like last week with John Oliver, and it's like he's talked about FIFA several times, and it's like you hear about the way cities have to bid on the Olympics and the World Cup and stuff like that, and it really does damage to communities. And it's like, if you were to approach it from that aspect, maybe you could make an interesting movie, but ultimately that's a completely different movie too. I mean, this is more about crew and racing, and it's about an underdog getting a chance and winning the big tournament at the race at the end.
Yeah, that's something that, again, bringing up your view of the movie, is they could have really dove deep into it. There could be some politics and how they have to bring this to the town, or there could be some impact and what this could all mean. But it doesn't, like you said at the beginning, it doesn't dive deep into any of this. It really just surface level. It seemed to me watching the movie that Hal Needham or the screenwriters, they just wanted to hit all the requisite beats without knowing exactly what those requisite beats were supposed to mean.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense. And
yeah, because I mean, you look at the Karate Kid, and I mean, it's a movie that hits all of the exact same beats. It hits all of the same beats, but the reason it works is because we come to care about Daniel and we come to care about Miyagi. And one of the things that struck me the last time I watched this before this podcast is that that's the one thing within the genre that this movie doesn't really have, which is that mentor figure.
Yeah.
Rocky has Mickey, Daniel has Mr. Miyagi, Cole Trickle has Harry in Days of Thunder, and so on and so forth. It's a very well-worn trope in the genre. And I mean, Crew doesn't have that in this movie. I mean, I think part of the reason is that I think because BMX racing is so much more about personal talent, like there's not quite as much that you can teach in this respect than and you can some of those other sports. But at the same time, I mean, I think if you could figure out a way to add that character, I mean, maybe you would be able to have the emotional component be stronger than what it is in this movie.
Right. Maybe the Ray Walston character could have been, a little bit of script retooling, that he could have been, kind of a mentor. Right? That's an interesting idea. Johnny, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I made this note that I thought maybe Christian, the romantic interest, could have been somewhat of a mentor. Could have been because she's already a professional, right? Like she could have been more of a trainer, and there could have been like a montage where that's where they develop their relationship more and become more three-dimensional and everything. But yeah, I mean, I think she could have been that role.
And the thing is, I think they do try to do that with Christian, because I mean, she teaches. She teaches him that one trick where it's like he wasn't getting it, and that's like, take off,
and then that was it. Though
remove the mattresses, and then that's it. But I mean, Ray Walston as Timur is probably the most engaging character in the entire movie. He's the liveliest, I think. Yeah. And he with, like he said, with some, and seeing as though he's the one who especially ends up getting Crew into the race with his donations to the cause. I mean, you his
$27,000 worth of t-shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe I take it back. The Timur character, I agree. It's Christian, definitely. She was, all the pieces are there for her to be the mentor. She's the one that has the in. She's the one that can teach him everything. But I think, again, it goes to that where they have the pieces, they just don't know how to line them up and how to fit them together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that also comes down to the fact that they had terrible writers. You gotta get better screenwriters. If you're gonna follow the formula, and first of all, hire some good writers.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of the drama just seemed really manufactured, and it was just so silly the weight that they were trying to give everything. But again, I say this stuff, but I was having a blast. I don't think I've laughed this hard at a movie in a long time. It was really fun just to see what they were trying to do, even though it wasn't.
No, it's really entertaining as a piece of 1980s cheese. I mean, I really have a soft spot for the soundtrack. It's like all of the right notes as far as that type of soundtrack was in the 1980s. And it's like it's funny, the song that actually plays during the end credits and the song that plays during the qualifying, Thunder in Your Heart, like the more I started listening to that song, the more I'm like, this is really cheesy lyrics if you really listen to the lyrics, but also I have a feeling that might be one of the songs that they had in the mind when they were writing the montage song in Team America, World Police, because it is exactly that type of song, and it's completely ridiculous.
You know, it's funny, like after watching the movie, that song you hear in the beginning credits, Break the Ice, that was in my head for days after I watched it. I was just going, break the ice over and over again. I couldn't get it out of my head. But then also I thought, I kept hearing or wanting to hear You're the Best from Karate Kid during the last, racing scene, during the hell track scene.
Yeah.
That totally would have fit. Oh man, we need to write somebody, Johnny, and let them know.
Yeah, we should do that.
Well, I think we mentioned in a previous episode, Brian, you said something about the lyrics being silly. And I think we talked about, and maybe you'll agree with this, sometimes if you're listening to a song, and again, coming from a composer, this probably hits a little closer to home. If the music isn't as catchy, your brain starts to focus on the lyrics.
Yeah.
And then if you start noticing that the lyrics aren't good, then you're like, this is not.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, and the thing is, I do think Thunder in Your Heart is part of the reason why the qualifying races work as well as they do as an individual sequence in the movie. And it's funny because of the fact that you're basically just hearing the same part of that song in a loop during that qualifying sequence. You don't go beyond the first verse and the first verse and the first chorus. It's basically just that. So you don't. It's not until the end credits that you're able to listen to the entire lyrics for that song, and it's the second verse that gets really crazy and really cheesy.
Yeah. Well, we might as well, since we're talking about music, I know that Send Me an Angel came up and I was like, oh, I actually know this song. Like it's on my regular rotation. We might as well talk about that. Was it prom or just a dance or what was it?
I think it was. So it's either a dance that is part of this celebration for Hell Track. Because I mean, otherwise, why the heck would Team Mongoose be there all? If it's just a dance for the school, why would everybody be there? But so they play the Spark song, which has the weirdest dance routine ever. And I think at this point you kind of have to I feel like at this point I have to bring up. So the Reynolds twins are played by Chad and Carrie Hayes, and if those names mean anything to you, they were the writers on the first two Conjuring movies.
Are you kidding me?
No, I think it was Ben David Grabinski, the director of Happily, that just came out.
Right.
I think he mentioned it on Twitter last year when the Vinegar Syndrome disc came out, and I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding me. And sure enough, I looked on IMDb and it's like, yep, that's them.
Wow.
It's like,
oh my gosh.
they're definitely better writers than they are actors.
They should have wrote the Rad screenplay then.
Yeah. So what you're saying is life improves.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, if you look at their credits, like they've been writing for a long time. It's like The Conjuring is easily the most famous thing that they've done, but it's like they've been screenwriting since the 90s. So it's like, why couldn't they have written this? It's like they might have been able to do something, but yeah, when he brought that up on Twitter last year, it's like, oh my god, I can't get that out of my head now.
And what's terrible is like being movie buffs and stuff like that. It's like that's one of those things where you're like, why don't I know that? Like that seems like something that I should know.
Well, I think the fact that this movie was out of print really for so long, I think that might be it. Like if this movie had gotten a regular DVD release after the Laserdisc transferred to Blu-ray, I think if it hadn't taken as long to get a proper modern day release, I think we probably would have been better known. But the fact that he put it out there, and I'm like, oh my god, but yeah, that is the most ridiculous scene. But it's like, no, the Send Me an Angel scene, it's like it's the most iconic part of the entire movie. It's the part that everybody remembers.
Well, that's my question. Do people remember it because it worked for them, or do people remember it because it was just so unintentionally hilarious?
I have a feeling it's kind of a combination of both. Because I mean, the thing is, it's like I think that's the scene where like Hal Needham probably saw that in the script and realized, I'm going to direct the hell out of this scene. This is going to be the one scene that everybody remembers. Everybody's going to talk about it. It's going to be BMX bikers dancing, and it's like, and you look at the filmmaking in that sequence. I mean, he goes all out. He does things that you don't see throughout the rest of the movie. You see camera angles you don't see throughout the rest of the movie. You see use of slow motion, use of different close-ups and stuff like that. It's insane.
Yeah, they built a bunch of rigs for Aunt Becky to sit on.
Well, that was my thing. I don't know. I think that's the only way to really appreciate this movie is from and that's why I got a kick out of it. It's like I could see what's going on, but it's like you can't take this seriously.
No,
it reminded me of the Saturday Night Live sequence in Airplane, where Robert Hayes is dancing. It reminded me, like later on, speaking of the Zucker brothers, of like Naked Gun 2.5, where it's Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley. They have that dance sequence where it's obviously their doubles. It's the camera's back, and it's just so you can tell that it's not Lori Loughlin. You can tell, and the positive thing that I had about the movie is I kept picking on, oh, that's Lori Loughlin's stunt double. Oh, that's Lori Loughlin's stunt double. To me, though, Bill Allen, I thought he was actually a professional biker that they taught.
Yeah,
but that's not the case. I think it was.
Yeah, you can see his stunt double as well too. If you look for it, you can tell when it's not him.
Yeah, but I think that's a plus, at least for me, because I wasn't looking. I was too busy looking at the wig on the.
Yeah.
But I just thought, like, the way she was riding the seat and the way that they were posing and the way that they were moving around, I was like, are you kidding me?
No, that's why I think Hal Needham saw that sequence in the script and it's like, I'm gonna make this the most memorable scene in the entire movie. And this is going to be a scene that people remember. And yes, you do.
Well, it rivals the ass sliding scene, which
oh god, yeah.
I turned to my wife and I was like, he keeps saying ass sliding. Isn't this just sliding?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, is this a thing that they do in small? Like, I get water parks and stuff like that, and I was just giggling my butt off. Just the slow motion shots and how the romance of it. And she picks up that rock and she throws it behind him in the lake, and I was like, oh, I would have thrown it right at him. That would have been funnier.
Oh, I mean the whole love story in this is hilarious, and it's like I love that it's like one of the things that they do later on in the evolution of the love story is the fact that it's like they go riding together and like they jump in the lake, and it's like, you really want me doing that with your bikes? I just it's this movie's so, and the relationship starts so quickly. Like they don't even know each other. Like before that dancing sequence, they've shared like 2 interactions, and they were both involving like no dialogue whatsoever.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to keep going back to they have the pieces, they just don't know how to fit them together kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought it was funny. Like, and I really love the conversation we just had about how it's a Christian that should be the mentor, and it's there. And there's even the part where, you know, finally Krug has enough with Duke's like meddling, and he goes off and he pouts by himself, and she tries to go and talk to him. He has that whole monologue, and I was like, this would work if it was a parody, but I think they're treating it like it's serious. Like it. So a lot of it was unintentionally funny. It's not like Hot Rod, you know, with Andy Samberg. It's not like that where they're kind of poking fun at all the tropes. It was just funny how, and she gets mad. And then like we talked about, like the next scene, like I thought it was funny.
He points to a poster and they get back together.
Yeah, that's it. And then he has a scene where he goes and he does his bike route again, and he makes it under time. And I'm like, oh, that's a character arc?
Yeah,
I guess so.
And then he goes and talks to her, and it's again, problem resolved, just like that.
Well, and it's funny because of the fact that, like, I look at that second bike route scene as like, oh, hey, so he actually succeeded in doing his bike route without screwing it up for anybody. It's like, that's why the town gets behind him. It's like, yeah, it's really absurd. It's really absurd, but yeah, it's silly and it's really entertaining too. Like that. Watching this after almost 30 years of having not seen it, it's like, yeah, this isn't a good movie, but it is kind of like, this is one of those movies I would genuinely use the word guilty pleasure about, because of the fact that I don't think it's good, but I think it's entertaining.
Yeah. And that's what I said. I was laughing hysterically just because of everything. And again, my wife is like, I don't remember it being this bad. I think that goes back to when you see it as you do, you know, it's still there. Like, you still identify with Krug, you still identify with the underdog stuff. It's just the details that fill that in that you kind of gloss over.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, it's like, I couldn't have, you know, when I watched this as a kid, I couldn't have told you, you know, the tropes of this genre. I can tell you like the beats of this genre that are supposed to work and what they're not. I watched it because I enjoyed it as an experience of watching the movie. And it's like, that was how it was for a long time until movies started to hit me differently, you know, and it was movies that I wasn't used to seeing too. And like, now I can look at this and it's like, yeah, this is very much in league with all of these other underdog movies that it's like I'm so accustomed to.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Before we, you know, wrap up or get to our final segment though, was there any, like, I started writing down dialogue that was just cracking me up. Was there and I think I'll tell you some of my favorite dialogue, and then if there's anything that the two of you want to talk about as far as like stuff that was just unintentionally funny or any final topics. But again, I laughed at a lot of the stuff. Like, we talked about This Is Some Parade. We talked about, Brian, you mentioned the mother that he helps, and all of a sudden she's like wandering back and forth in front of a picket line or something where they're gathering. She's like, my cake is in the oven. Like, why did you leave your house? Or
so un-American.
This is so
what she says. And it's like, what's this mean?
I like the other line was Sergeant Smith comes up during the parade and he rides up to Christian. He's like, have you seen a kid on a bike?
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about that scene where it's like the police officers just like chasing Krug through the lumber yard.
Yeah, and it's like, was he actually after him for a specific reason, or is it just
exactly, or is it just like, oh hey, nothing's going on in this town?
Well, apparently he chases every kid. That's his job. He just chases the kids in town.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're just down. Yeah, that was charming. I didn't mind a lot. Like, It's just one of the thousand things that they try to bring up as far as drama. I thought that was great. The other thing too, I talked about how when the music isn't good, you start noticing the lyrics. Like when the dialogue isn't good, you start noticing. I mean, some of the actors are giving it their best that they can. I know there's a part where Duke is talking to the mayor, and Duke goes, "What do you think?" And the mayor's like, "Great." Like there's no emotion to it. I'm like, "Oh, could we try that again?" Let's try that take again. And so the other thing that I thought was funny was there's a part where they're announcing at the end, like when they're doing the announcements, and the announcer's like, they're competing for some $10,000. And right when I was thinking some $10,000, my 12-year-old was watching, eating his popsicle, and he goes, some? Like even my 12-year-old was noticing that the dialogue didn't really work. I thought that was great. But yeah, some of the dialogue is just, after a while, you give up on it being, taking it seriously, and just start enjoying it for what it is as a guilty pleasure. Johnny, was there anything you wanted to mention?
Yeah, all I know is every time I heard them say the word radical, my inner Millhouse wanted to yell the strain, "Oh, I say radical. That's that thing that I say."
That's surprising. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I love. So there are a couple of things that I noticed on my last rewatch of this before the podcast, where it's like, they have like the preppy asshole at the beginning of the movie and then like completely disappears.
Yeah.
You have the girl the crew has a crush on before Christian comes in, and she shuts him down, and it's like, oh, okay, we just never hear from her again.
I thought she was a teacher at first too. I was like, is that a teacher? She looks 10 years older than him.
Yeah.
Well, and then so when Bart and the two girls go into the diner that crew works at, and the I guess the manager or something like that, even though it's the mayor, I guess it's the mayor who runs this little restaurant, and he's the one who like puts this stupid sign. It's like, oh yeah, reserve for $5. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was it. They were done. That was the end of the scene. I was like, what was the point of
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. All right. Okay, so if there's nothing else, and we can even tie it up, at the end of every episode, Brian, we come down to the part where we think, is this worth remembering, or is it worth a remake? Again, mentioning that, does it still stand up? Does it still stand the test of time? You brought Rad in, and again, man, we appreciate you bringing this in. What are your thoughts? Do you think this is worth remembering, or is it worth a remake?
I think if you watch this at a certain point in your childhood, I think it's also, I think you'll probably invariably have a special place in your heart, even if you recognize the faults and the flaws and what makes it just silly and ridiculous to watch. We talked earlier about how there are different things in this movie that could have been done that might make it in a more interesting movie. But I mean, it's not good enough to where it's like it's untouchable as a movie, but it's also not a movie that I would ever see somebody. It's so much of the 80s, of the moment. Like there's so many things about it that fit in that decade that, I mean, you can't really divorce it from that decade. So, but I mean, I have a soft spot for this movie, even though I recognize it's not a good movie at this point.
Okay, so you'd say it's worth remembering.
For me, at least. I mean, I'm sure people watched it as a kid. It's worth remembering. But I mean, if you come to it as an adult, it's like it's easy to think it's hilarious because it is hilarious, just how ridiculous this movie is.
Right. Johnny, what do you think? Where do you stand?
Well, when I think about this movie, I think about my experience as a kid and being, I enjoyed the BMX scene. I liked riding around town on my BMX. And so I really enjoyed watching all the freestyle BMX moves. I think that's fun. I think that's what they were trying to do too, is just focus on these pro freestyle BMXers, and I want to say, did this kind of like start the X Games? Because the X Games came out like in the 90s, I remember, and I wanted, because this kind of felt like an X Games type of movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But,
I mean, I
yes.
wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Yeah. But I really enjoy that part. I like watching them do their tricks, and I think that's fun. And so I enjoy it for that part. But when it comes to the story, and when it comes to the character development, and the just everything else, the dialogue we talked about, all those things, they fell short. And so I think for me, I would say they could remake this, and they could do it better, and they could write a better script, hire some better writers, and they could get a better director, and get some better actors, and everything could be better. So I think it could be remade, and I think it could be just as fun, or even better. But I will say I enjoy the tricks. I like watching the freestyle tricks. But for me, worth a remake.
Okay. Well, cutting to the chase, it depends on what you want, right? I mean, if this works as a guilty pleasure, as something that isn't supposed to be taken seriously, it's a blast. Like when they're riding around on their bikes, and that's supposed to be the big dance sequence, but they're on bikes. It's so ridiculous that there's no way to take it other than, well, this is so silly that I'm just supposed to laugh at how silly it is. If you want to do if you want to do the politics, if you want to have like gorgeous, the cinematography or the footage of the biking is fine, but it's not like, Warren Miller, quality type. You could get somebody to come in and kind of shoot it like that, to be like this gorgeous kind of Michael Bay-ish kind of version of that, to get people excited for it. And they have making Premium Rush, or making American Flyers, or a lot of movies have dealt with the biking that you can take seriously. So there is a way to remake that. I just think for what this, so it's definitely worth a remake, and there's definitely a better version of this movie, like you said. But as far as it existing and meaning to people, I don't think there's a way you could, other than like going full on and making from the beginning, not making sure everybody knows that it's not sincere and it is supposed to be taken like a joke. I would definitely say that it is worth a remake, but not to say it's not a bad movie, because I enjoyed this like you wouldn't believe.
Hey, it's not a bad movie. It's a rad movie.
It's
Come on, man. I had to go there.
You had to. All right. Well, Brian, again, we wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention, and we appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you? Where can we read your work and
the main hub? Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad you guys enjoyed watching this movie. I really enjoyed talking to you about it. You can read my work at www.sonic-cinema.com. You can listen to the podcast at Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. And also there's www.patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I'm also taking a bit of a dive into streaming over at Twitch, and that was, and so that's another place to find me. But thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed this talk. I enjoyed talking about this movie. It's funny how cheesy this movie is, but there's a lot to talk about with regards to how cheesy this movie is, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And again, I don't know if we mentioned it before, but you have your review of Rad, you have your series like A Movie a Day, or the repertoire reviews, or all, you have projects that you're at on your website. And so it's, it's a little bit of everything. And it's a really fun read. It's really fun getting your opinions of everything and finding out where you stand. And it's been great getting to know you, especially on Twitter. So again, everybody go check out Brian's work, and again, you won't regret it. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. And again, that was rad. Again, we want to thank Brian, Mr. Brian Skutle, for coming on the podcast. It's great having, like you said, it's great having guests on, so we can bounce off other people besides our own boring selves.
Yeah, my favorite episodes are the ones when we have guests. So we should have guests every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is kind of the plan for the next month or so, anyway. But like we always do, we wanted to have kind of an outro, and Johnny, what you and I settled on is, again, going back to Rad, it's a lot of people hate using the term guilty pleasure, but there's no way, especially with a movie like Rad, which I don't think on a filmmaking level, I don't think it's good per se. I mean, it is enjoyable, but it still is enjoyable despite its not very movie-ish, problems, and so we kind of wanted to talk about movies that, well, maybe not guilty pleasures, but movies that are considered not good, but that we enjoy anyway. Kind of do a top 3 of those.
Okay.
Top 3. That's funny. Anyway, so Johnny, why don't you go ahead and let's do the same thing. Let's just pick our you pick one, I'll pick one, and then we'll just.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I thought of was a movie that I really enjoy, and I know a lot of people do enjoy, but a lot of people hate it as well. So I picked Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, okay.
Because you can argue both ways. Hey, it has some good things going for it, but it also can just be argued that it's just the worst movie ever made.
Yeah.
But I really just kind of like enjoy watching this movie. I just kind of sit back and just laugh my butt off when I watch this movie. So yeah, guilty pleasure all the way for me. Napoleon Dynamite.
And it's a guilty pleasure all the way through, right? I think I remember seeing it in the theater, and I thought that first half hour was some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. And then I think I was just done after that. And so it was another hour of.
Well, the thing with that movie, though, there are scenes that even though I know it's coming, I still laugh hysterically when I see those scenes. Like when Uncle Rico throws a steak at Napoleon and hits him right in the face, like that just makes me laugh every single time, and I can't stop laughing. So I really enjoy that movie. And
it's hard to fault people for liking it. It's because I can see why somebody would enjoy that. It's very fun. It's localized. Yeah, so that makes sense. So the first one I pick, I don't know if we've talked about this. I am a huge Godzilla fan. I've been a Godzilla fan since I was a little kid, and it was the monster on monster movies where, the big kaiju fights where they'd, that's the stuff that I really vibed with. And now as a serious critic, there are a few Godzilla movies like the first one or the Shin Godzilla that just barely came out a couple years ago that can be considered quality Godzilla movies with a purpose. But when I think of Godzilla, and again, you can pick any Godzilla movie with the men in monster costumes, and any of those will do. But the one that I always go for is Godzilla versus Megalon, which it's so silly. It's these two friends and their little brother or something like that. See, I can't even remember the plot details. And they have this robot that grows the giant size, and Godzilla and this jaguar, they team up. And it's funny because they fight the two monsters, and Megalon and Gigan, and they do it's like a tag team wrestling match. It's just so silly, but that's the fun of Godzilla. It's like just watching them get the stupid plot stuff out of the way, and let's see these two guys in monster suits just kind of punch each other and destroy fake buildings.
Yeah,
that's a blast. I don't know, and then again, we mentioned stuff of being kids versus adults. Now, when I was a kid, I would have done anything for Godzilla toys, done chores for money, or just give me this and we'll count it as my Christmas. I would have just done anything for Godzilla toys. And now that I'm an adult and I'm old enough to buy Godzilla toys, I'll go on eBay and I'll look every now and then. I'll be like, why am I going to pay $30 for that? So I've gotten the money, but it's just not important to me. I just think that's really funny. So anyway, that was Godzilla versus Megalon is my top pick.
Yeah. I mean, I knew you were a Godzilla fan, so that makes sense. You picked that one.
Yeah. So what's your second?
Well, this is a movie that I saw a while ago, and it was talked up quite a bit before I saw it. So I was expecting a lot, and it didn't disappoint, even though I know it's not really a well-made movie, but there are some elements about it I really, really enjoy, and that's Dirty Work. Dirty Work, another one that always makes me laugh. I don't know what it is about that movie. It always makes me laugh. And sometimes you can kind of think that, why am I laughing at this? It's not really that funny, but you still end up, laughing at it, and I can still enjoy it on some level.
We did mention that during our Three Amigos episode. You talked about Chevy Chase getting a kick out of him.
Right, yeah.
What are some of the lines from that movie that really crack you up?
Well, there's that scene in the prison where Norm Macdonald is like, we're in prison. You know what happens in prison, right? And Artie's like, no, I never heard of that. And then he comes back like, that's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, you got to watch the movie to understand what's going on. But it's super funny in that moment.
Okay, so Dirty Work, yeah, that's a good one. My second pick, Jaws is very formative to me. It was the movie that got me into movies. It's I would pick it as one of the greatest movies of all time. So it's so disheartening to see like each sequel just get worse, and not just worse, but like phenomenally bad. Like, oh my gosh, this is an embarrassment, a blight on the name. And so Jaws: The Revenge, the fourth one, it's so ineptly made, but it's fascinating as far as like how badly it's done, and listening to podcasts like How Did This Get Made did a podcast on it, or Leighton Eversole on YouTube just did a retrospective on it, and just seeing them react. It's the story of the Mrs. Brody. She's convinced that the shark is out for revenge. And so they're trying to find, and so she goes to the Bahamas, and for some reason the shark tracks her there, even though great whites can't survive in the warm water. And it's just, and Michael Caine's in it, and the story is that he won the Oscar for Hannah and Her Sisters, but he wasn't there to accept his award because he was filming Jaws: The Revenge. And his story later is, I've never seen Jaws: The Revenge. By all accounts, it's a terrible movie, but I've seen the house that it paid for, and the house is amazing. So that's a very famous. And then if you can find the Siskel and Ebert clip where they review Jaws: The Revenge, and just they tear it to pieces. The funniest part is at the end where for some reason, Michael Caine, he's a pilot, and he crashes his plane into the water to stop a shark from eating Ellen Brody. And then you think he's dead, but when he climbs out of the water onto the boat, his shirt is completely dry. It's just loaded with these weird inconsistencies. And again, the Eversole video goes into the history of the making it, but it's literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen, just because of how embarrassing everything is. But it's fascinating, as a historical kind of artifact on how sequels can go wrong. So Jaws: The Revenge, that's my number 2. Have you seen Jaws: The Revenge?
I believe I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you don't need to see it again. What was your third pick?
Okay, well, we mentioned this one in the episode, and I don't think it's really necessarily a bad movie. It wasn't, obviously, it's not poorly made, but I feel guilty for watching it because there's a lot of inappropriate stuff in this movie, and so, but I really enjoy the movie, so it's hard for me to kind of yeah. Anyway, Team America: World Police.
Okay.
Like, really, really well made. Like, with puppets, it's really well done. The sets are amazing. Everything about it is, just so pristine and so well done. The music's funny. Everything about it I think is pretty good. But there's so much bad stuff in it that I just feel guilty for watching it. But I still enjoy watching it.
Well, it does have like all the South Park stuff. I'm not, like, we've talked about that before. I used to be a South Park fan, but then I thought as soon as they started just going for the jugular and trying to... it kind of lost me. But that first season is full of funny stuff. And Team America, even though, I would agree with you, there's a lot of iffy stuff in it, but there's, the montage song is really funny. The Matt Damon puppet. Right. So every now and then they do hit that. So that's a good pick. And so my third pick, just to, it's getting a little deeper, but I know that also we've talked about Batman, and I know that Batman and Robin is kind of reviled as far as sequels go, but it's a movie. I'm still not going to say it's a good movie. It's still a bad movie, but I think it has to do more with, it's hard. Like, there's a particular Batman that I enjoy. I want to see my Batman a certain way. And so seeing it from it's weird that the series goes full circle trying to escape the Adam West Batman, and then it just ends up going right back and becoming an Adam West, but not as enjoyable, not as funny. And there's a lot of, it's not fun to, if you get caught up in what you think of what a character should be, that's really what you vibe against. But watching it all these years later, it's not that bad. It's not the worst movie ever made. It's not the worst comic book movie ever made, because it makes a decision to be corny and hokey from frame one, and it's that way all the way through. And so it's at least consistent with what it's trying to do, even though I don't think it's it's good.
Let me ask you this: how often do you watch that movie? Do you actually put it in once in a while and watch it on purpose?
Well, I think maybe I'll watch it once every 3 years or something like that. I can't remember the last time I watched it in full. I'll mostly just watch parts, because like any movie, there are parts of it that are interesting. And it's fun to watch it from a perspective of it's hilarious what they were trying to do and how it didn't vibe with what audiences wanted at the time.
Yeah.
But again, I just go back to it as it's not the worst thing to ever grace our screens. There are worse, less honest things out there. And I think that's to go with Rad, like we talked about, it affected people. They have an affinity for it, and it's, even though that affinity is, this is so silly, but it's still enjoyable. It's kind of hard to kind of appreciate a movie from that perspective. So I think that was the whole point of our conversation here. So what was your 3 again?
It was Napoleon Dynamite, Dirty Work, and Team America: World Police.
Okay. And then I had Godzilla versus Megalon. I had Jaws the Revenge and Batman and Robin. Again, there are worse things out there, but we just kind of want to highlight kind of the difference there. So again, that was our conversation on Rad and on Guilty Pleasures. And next week, we're continuing with our next time, because we're recording next week. Our next time, we're going to have another Twitter friend on. His name is, we'll call him Kevin the Critic. I'm not sure if he wants me to use his full name, but again, he's been a good friend, and we've had disagreements before, but he and I are the type, like you and I are. It's like, it's not, even if we disagree, it's not making fun of each other or making each other feel bad. So we've come to understanding that, and it's fun having those conversations, because you see who the other person is by what they see in a movie, even if it doesn't mesh with yours, and that makes it interesting.
Yeah, you can see from their perspective, and I think that helps.
Yeah, and it's good to have that. So Kevin has picked The Witches from 1990.
Okay.
A Nicholas Roeg movie. I think I remember seeing it. I remember liking it. I don't remember anything about the movie specifically, other than the fact that I thought it was very stylish and very well done, which for a Roeg movie, we talked about him before, is not surprising as far as being a good watch. So I'm excited to watch that again. So again, next time we gather here, it'll be The Witches from 1990. Was there anything else you wanted to add to the Rad conversation?
No, I'm good with that. But as far as Witches go, I think I told you this is a favorite of my wife's. She loves this movie, and so she watches it every Halloween. So I come in and out. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. I think I've seen it once all the way through. So this will be good for me to watch it again and kind of revisit it. So I'm excited. But
it's not one of those movies where you bring it up and then you're like, I don't want to have to sit. It's only because she watches it every year. So it's like, that one again. You know what I mean? But so I'll sit down and watch it, and maybe we'll watch it together. Okay. Well, it could be worse. She could be watching Hocus Pocus every Halloween.
That could be worse. You're right.
Okay. All right. So again, we'll be back to talk about The Witches. But until then, I'm Darin Lumberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And we'll see you next time, guys.